Hello. Welcome back to Division 1 Rejects. If this is your first episode, you're in for a fucking treat. If this is your 100th episode, you're in for a fucking treat. I don't know if there's any other two ways to say about it. A lot of new content coming to D1 Rejects, and we're going to be changing a lot of stuff moving forward as far as the formula of our show. Still a lot of the same coverage that you've come to expect from us. Just a shitload more of it. And excuse all of the expletives. I think that illustrates how excited I am. One, about this episode, and two, about the type of people we're bringing onto this show and the direction this show is heading. This is episode 136, recording this the night of October 16th. I appreciate you joining me. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo here. But I've got some great people joining me with some awesome conversations. First of all, linebacker from Grand Valley State, one of our D1R athletes, Abe Swanson, joins us here very soon to talk about the Anchor Bone Classic this last weekend and the way that the Lakers came out, looked dominant at certain stretches there in Lubbers Stadium. We'll talk to Abe here shortly. Also, Matt Witwicki, also known as Wit from D2Football.com, the NSIC panelist. He joins me in a little bit to talk about, I guess, the national scene of D2, as well as a deep dive into the Northern Sun Conference playoff picture, Mankato, Bemidji, top dog, some of the middle tier teams like a Duluth, a Wayne State, Augustana. Who's going to be the team to make that jump? We talk with him later. We've got some Week 7 recaps on the D2 side of things, some top 10 upsets to talk about. I'm out of breath. We're like a minute into this shit. I'm out of breath. Otherwise, though, Jimmy Martin, our D3 Insider, will join me later. We talk through all the best D3 games from Week 7. And finally, our new NAIA Insider to Division 1 Rejects, Matthew Schwarzler. He joins me towards the end of the episode, and he brought the heat today. I'm going to tell you right now, if you've not tuned into some NAIA content, either stick around for that one, use the timestamps. If you're on YouTube, remember the chapters at the bottom of the video. Fast forward to any part of the conversation that sounds great to you. Otherwise, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all the timestamps and the markers are in the description of the episode. We have so much great content today. I'm pumped about it. I want to quit talking about it and get right into it. But also on the more NFL side of things, how about Tyson Bagent scoring his first NFL touchdown? The PSAC representation from Shepherd, he gets his first score in the league. And then Craig Reynolds, dog for the Detroit Lions, the Kutztown alum, had a huge block and also some other great plays in a big Lions win in Tampa Bay. We'll talk about a little bit. But again, like I said, no more stalling. Let's get into the content. As always, you can watch this episode on YouTube. Don't forget, subscribe. Right now, I'm telling you, I'm going to stop and I'm going to wait until you subscribe. That's enough. All right. Otherwise, listen pretty much anywhere else. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. Follow us on the socials. Just announced our most recent Player of the Week awards. We'll talk about that as well. Do not forget to subscribe. I can't tell you more and more enough, but enough of it. Let's get into the conversation with Abe. Get this thing started. Joining the show tonight, this guy in the Laker defense, they emptied the playbook, brought a lot of pressure against the Strong Ferris team this weekend. When he's not playing, spends his weekends watching some ball and pepinos. Right? Happy to keep the Anchor Bone Trophy in Allendale. It's linebacker, D1R athlete, Abe Swanson. What's up, fella?
For sure. Thanks, Kobe. Appreciate you having me on the show again.
Of course,
I would say once in a lifetime opportunity, but this is my second time. But you guys do a great job spreading all divisions across the network, primarily D2. So just shout out to all you guys that keep doing your work, man. I know it doesn't go unseen on this side. My family's mentioned it. A ton of my teammates have mentioned it. So keep up the great work.
It's awesome, man. Thank you, brother. Tell me about your little spot over there in Pepinos, huh?
Yeah, man. Pepinos in Allendale. That's the spot. It's the go-to spot. There's a couple of them over here in Allendale that I would say are my go-to spots. But, Pepinos in Allendale, they look after me. I look after them. So we can keep this rolling. Hopefully we'll have a good connection going in the future. Just stack things on top of things.
Love to see it. And you and I were talking before we got going about that injury to Deion Small in the Ferris game. And it was, first of all, great to see that he was in stable condition. And then obviously all the prayers and stuff that came out of that. And, we hope that, he's making a full recovery because, like you kind of alluded to before, it's scary shit, man. Every time that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just Laker Nation and myself, we just want to reach out our prayers to Deion Small. One heck of a football player, man. He gave it his all game long. And then just, kind of one of those plays that happened. So definitely my prayers are with him and his family and the Ferris State Bulldogs. And I'm just praying that he makes a full recovery and is able to return to the game that he loves.
Absolutely. He was, he's definitely, he is a difference maker for that squad. And he showed that off on Saturday, even though the start of that game did not go their way, man. Let's talk about that game a little bit, the environment down there in Lubbers. I don't know if anyone had a bingo card going into the game on this and what the different slots looked like. I can bet you that 35-0 start from the guys in blue was not on one of the squares.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that on that bingo card. But for myself, that's kind of the mentality that we had.
Love
You
it.
talked about that environment, man. It's a packed house every single weekend. Our Laker Nation, they come out in full support of this team. We love them. Our fans love them. Or our fans love us, and we love them. So for them to just come out, in full effect, and then you have obviously your rivals a little bit up the way up north. Their fans bring it too, and you actually felt it when we were up 35-0. They were pretty quiet, but then when they started rumbling back, that sideline was juiced and those fans were juiced, and you were hearing it all over. So definitely, I would say the greatest atmosphere in D2.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at other schools, smaller Division I schools, they don't get to feel that experience, and we get to feel that every year with the Anchor Bone Classic and other else of our home games. So, I mean, for me as a player, it doesn't really affect me that much. I just love putting on a show for my teammates and putting it on for my family, because that's really why I do it, is for my family and my teammates next to me. So, I mean, like you said, man, it was a jumping atmosphere. It was great to get out there and get the win.
I love that. And talk about heading into that game, obviously, another thing that maybe people didn't expect, Grand Valley and Ferris both heading into that game with one loss. Now, albeit number 2 team in the country, an FCS squad over there in Montana, 2 really top quality squads, a loss is a loss. And especially at the D2 level, if you've got more than one of those, all of a sudden those chances at getting into a playoffs and getting a great bid onto that playoff bracket start to become slimmer and slimmer. So I had to imagine that maybe while you guys probably didn't talk vocally about that a whole lot, that had to be sitting on the back of your minds, man.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for both teams, when you're walking into that game 4-1,
Absolutely.
both teams feel like they should be 5-0. Unfortunately, those aren't the circumstances. You kind of got to deal with what it takes. You know what it takes to win. You know what the future looks like. So just going out there and executing your job, that didn't really weigh on us too much. We're just focused on that next week. We focus every week just going 1-0,
For sure.
doing our jobs, executing fundamentally, being physical up front, being physical in our back end. So, that first loss in week 1, I don't think that represented what this defense was all about, what this team was all about. Obviously, there was a lot of growth that needed to be happened. I think we're taking strides. We have yet to play the complete game of what is up to our standard for Grand Valley football. So, each week we've been growing. We continue to look to grow. We look at the areas where we are exceeding really well, and then we look at areas that we need to focus on. We spend a lot of our practice time focusing on those areas, and also doing just the simple stuff. Going back to the fundamentals, going back to our base stuff, going back to the basics. So as this ship keeps on sailing, this Grand Valley team's not done growing. We haven't reached the top of the mountain just yet.
I like that. Little ship keeps on sailing, hit a little bit of, might weather a storm or two, but she's always going to be upright. She's not going to capsize.
Yeah, exactly. Not too much weight on this ship,
Yeah, I got you. Now, talk about what y'all were able to do between the stripes, though. I mean, a couple of those catches, they were recognized, obviously. The beginning of that game with Tierney, the way he starts that thing off and just plucks that thing and does a little pirouette right to the pylon. Knott's catch, I mean, we've seen that one over and over again, but you have that happen. You guys go for that onside kick. You just keep compounding this lead. The pick 6, the game that Anthony had beside you, man, all of these things continue to go your way. And the biggest thing for me looking at your sideline, at least when I could on the broadcast, is your guys' composure. And I think Coach Wooster probably exemplified that more than anyone else. He never got too high or too low, and I think that was a direct reflection of the dudes on the team too, because even up 35-0, you guys you didn't change the way you approached the game. You playing the exact same game because the type of quality team that Ferris is. They can come back and do that. They do. They score 28 unanswered. But talk about that composure first of, even when you're in this situation where, a lot of people wouldn't have expected, there's, still all gas, no brakes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we were put in that position week 1. We were down by a couple scores, as a defense, we're saying, hey, we got to go out there and get stops. Even when we're up big in this game, 35-0, we're on the sideline. We're screaming, hey, we're down 21. We're down 14. Like, it doesn't change. Like, our mentality is the same. We got to go out there and stone these guys. Don't give them an inch. And that's just how we've handled things. That's how we've matured as a defense, how we've matured as a group. You mentioned the composed team. Obviously, a ton of exciting plays. But, you celebrate those plays and you're on to the next one. Because, in games like this, and when you play high-powered offenses like Ferris and other teams that are surrounding in D2, one play can change the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just momentum swings each and every way. You give them too much momentum, that game can go a totally different direction. You got to handle that. You got to be able to create a great play. You got to get lined up and get the next call because you got to keep executing. If you don't, go south, and next thing you know, you're not winning 35-0 anymore. They're coming back, and it's like, guys, we got to start rolling again. It's getting too close for comfort. We can't let off the gas.
Game like
we got to
that,
never
man,
lift mentality.
Like whoever can survive those waves, right? Because both teams are eventually going to have those, right? Where they have all the momentum. You guys started with it. Ferris fights back. Who can survive? Who can endure? And then that's eventually comes out on top. You guys obviously able to do that. And the momentum, it seems like it shifted for them a bit when Golker comes into the game and he starts leading them down these drives. How did you approach the offense differently, if at all, between Malik and Carson Golker and those two when they were, under center?
Yeah, obviously I'm not going to.
I don't need no scheme. You know what I mean? Hey, no scheme or nothing. Just general.
I got you. I'm not going to exploit like our game plans and stuff, but obviously we look at Malik and Carson as two different players, two different styles of quarterbacks. What we came to realize is that they're sticking to some of their base calls that we see more from Malik, but Carson's running them. So we kind of change up our plan. We're like, hey, let's just keep going. We're fired up. We're making plays. Obviously had a few busted coverages, a few busted calls, that create a lot of their yards, but if you look at if you just look at the game, I mean, we stick to our stuff. We keep running it, man. And who knows, it could be a lot to a little, to be up 35-0 to a team like Ferris, it's almost unheard of. Mm-hmm. So people are like, you're kind of like in the moment, you're slapping your face a little bit. You're like, hey, like, let's go. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Players are making plays. You mentioned Anthony's name, making plays. The guy is just a dude.
Unreal.
The guy is literally just a dude. Like you put him out there, you're like, hey, go to work, do your job. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna do my job, and I'm gonna show you some more.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned those catches. You talked about, Cody's first catch and that tumble in the end zone. Man, we've been working those tumbles the last 5 years, winter conditioning. Mm. Our strength coach is like, hey, do 3 somersaults for us, and it shows up on tape.
Hell yeah.
And you just chuckle because it's what shows up. Kyle Knott, man, ESPN top 3, just making plays. Your numbers called, making plays. Avery Moore. I mean, who's tackling that guy when the A train gets rolling, man? Who's stopping him? And when we just stick to what Grand Valley football is and what it means, man. I mean, it looks so bright, and even the future looks so bright. Guys coming up. Yep. I just mentioned guys that obviously, you got guys like me, Cade, Chris McCarroll, Cole Petrito, Stevie Roncelli, Colton Heibel, in their 6-year seniors.
Oh yeah.
And I mentioned a ton of guys that got 2 to 3 years left of eligibility. So, I mean, obviously I'm not looking past this because, my time's coming to an end, at the end of the season. I don't get to put on a Laker uniform anymore. So I'm leaving it all out there for those guys, the guys that I mentioned, those 6-year seniors, for this coaching staff, for my family, because that's all we got left. We only got 4 more guaranteed opportunities.
I hear you, man.
You never know.
What
I'm saying? It goes so fast. Blink of an eye, it's already halfway through the season.
I feel that. I had the opportunity to play against those Adams guys, man. Petrito and Roncelli, dude. We got a couple great OAA red matchups against those boys. I was playing like D tackle, D end at the time. They run that damn veer, and Roncelli's coming out. I'm just me and him the whole night. Just
give Roncelli that ball and that veer, man. Hard man to tackle. You saw it during KOR this year. They tried to squib it to Roncelli. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Hey, don't do that.
Don't do that. This guy's experienced.
I love it, man.
Man, like Stevie. Man, I mentioned Cardamone. You watch Stevie on the film. Man, that's just a dog, man. He doesn't care. Man, Stevie thinks he's 6'8", 250.
Yes.
That's how he plays.
That's great.
That's how he plays. He's got that. Yeah. He's got that mentality. It doesn't matter who you are. I'm gonna chop the tree. I'm gonna keep chopping until it falls.
I love that.
And man, that shows. Man, he juices this team. You have no idea what it's like to play with a guy like that. I mean, you probably do. Sorry, but like for me, playing.
I hear you though. I hear you.
playing with that guy, man, you're just looking at him. You're like, man, I got to go harder for this guy because he's counting on me. As much as he's putting out there, he's counting on me to give that much. And that, man, what I can say about, man, this team, man, I'm in love with them. Man, I'd do anything for them. They're my guys for the rest of my life. So just keep going out there for battle each Saturday, But more importantly, man, like each day, man, like I said, man, they're never guaranteed. The only couple more weeks left, man. And it's sad to think about, but I wouldn't trade any of these moments that I'm having for anything. I'm going to cherish these moments for the rest of my life. It's something that I'm going to carry with me until the day that I die, and then hopefully in the afterlife as well, man, because that's how important these guys are to me. That's how important this team is to me.
Hell yeah. I love that, dude. I do. Like, I love that. And I don't know how the hell I'm going to follow that, but I love that. Like, everything that you and those guys are about, and it's like something out of remember the Titans script, like, but in all the best ways, right? Of, like, playing for the dude next to you and, like, really developing those relationships and having that motivation, the even keel. And also, what doesn't go unnoticed too is having the play to back that up, right? Like being able to come together in those moments, like that's big time. So, not that we haven't seen this from Grand Valley in the past, but it does seem like you guys, that unit that has been so together, that's so well balanced and has a lot of really, really positive ball ahead of you guys, man.
And there's definitely an energy level, man. That game, like you said, the atmosphere, but like low key, if you just block out the noise, from the fans and you just focus on like that GV football, you're hearing the voices, man. You're hearing young guys doing call outs, doing the shout outs, man, getting you juiced. Man, I've done my time as being like the vocal leader. I don't have to say too much anymore because I know these guys and they believe in it. Everything that Coach Wooster's presented to us, they believe in it. And they just take it all in. And you can see it. We talked about something. The biggest thing that I think made this difference is that belief factor. All week long, a lot of us were presented with questions like, how good is this Ferris team, matching up? Do you guys think you can handle it? But, like, no one's flipping the script and saying, like, how good is this Grand Valley team? Obviously, I think a lot of that resorted back to our first couple weeks. I don't think we played Grand Valley football, not even close to Grand Valley football those first couple weeks, and then we start to get rolling, and it starts adding up, and you start really looking at it, really diving into it, and you're like, hey, man, they're stacking, they're getting momentum, and just this week, man, it just keeps adding to that. And like I said before, we haven't even put together that complete game. We're still striving for it. Like none of us, like nobody is satisfied. You walk in that building today on an off Monday, voluntary lifts because of the NCAA regulations.
Yeah,
you got guys on tape sitting there for a couple hours, diving in. Doesn't matter who we play. It's another opportunity to go out there and show what Grand Valley football is all about, and that's what it's just that obsession. It's that driving factor, and this team. I'm telling you right now, Kobe, this team is going to be special and is special right now.
I love it. I feel you, dude. And I don't disagree with you one bit. And it's important because you think about, people talk about momentum, right? And when teams get hot. And typically the teams that have that success and have that prolonged success in the year, they're not the team that starts off week one firing on all cylinders. I think people talk about it in the NFL a lot more because they play, they got a 17-week season and it's about what teams get hot at the right time. That's a very real thing at our level too. And being able to show growth, even when you are a top 5 team in the country, you can still grow in areas. You know that. Other teams know that. Those other top squads, and they still have areas to improve. And when you can do that and move along, and like you said, finally start to see pieces and inklings of that Grand Valley style of football and that upper echelon, that's either encouraging or terrifying, depending on which side you sit on, right? But no doubt from me over here, brother. I got you got a fan in me, and I'm excited to see where you guys go.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah,
it means a lot to me.
Of course, but I appreciate you coming back on, dude. I will see you this weekend. I won't ask you for any other scheme or anything like that, but it'll be a fun trip to the Dome for you guys. We'll see you.
It's all good, man. I'll see you up in northern Michigan this weekend, man. Let's catch up.
Absolutely. See you, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, I appreciate Abe coming on. I want to jump right in to these player of the week selections, man. Let's start with D2 on the note. Braden Gleason, the quarterback from Emporia, he's been balling out. All right. He's someone that we knew coming into the season, had a lot of hype around him over there in the NYAA. He's been living up to it. 42 for 49, 421 yards and 4 tuds. Let me tell you, the D2 Offensive Player of the Week award was a pretty easy one this week because this dude is continuing to play like this at an extremely high level. And if we look at the Hornets kind of schedule this year moving forward, he's obviously had a big part to play in their success. They're at 5-2 right now. The one loss coming against Pittsburgh State and then the other at Missouri Western, 2 very quality teams. This last performance against what we know is a solid Washburn squad at home, they win 38-23. So shout out to Braden. We'd love to get him on the show in the future. He balled. Otherwise, over in the PSAC now, let's make the move. Keith Charney, 6 tackles, 4 of them solo, 3 interceptions and a touchdown for the kid. And the Vulcans, all of a sudden looking very, very competent as a football squad over there in the PSAC. And if we look at their schedule, they sit at 5-1 right now. Their week 1 game was at Alderson Broadus, ended up getting canceled with a couple really quality wins. You look at a game over Kutztown in week 2, their week 1 game, 31-20 is a sticking point for them. They've also already beaten IUP, a team like Edinburgh. This last week was against Seton Hill. Their one loss coming to Shepherd on the year, who still kind of sits in the driver's seat, but they are on the other side of the PSAC. So right now, as far as their side of the PSAC goes, they're 4-0. The matchup this week for the Vulcans at number 7 Slippery Rock is going to be one for the books. If Keith can play like this, they might stand a chance. 3 takeaways is crazy. D2 Special Teams Player of the Week, that's Ethan Muncie from Emory and Henry. 8 punts, 42.9 yards average. 5 of his 8 were inside the 20-yard line. Impressive to do. To have a very high average and to put all of them and pin the opponent back. Shout out to them. We talked through the D3 Players of the Week later with Jimmy, so if you want to see those guys, fast forward. Otherwise, NAIA, we talk about Cavante and Friends, the Falcons, with Matt later. Cannon Karn from Baker, we talk about that squad a little bit. Those stats he put up, seriously impressive. And then finally, Demetrius Gilbert over there at Bethel. So shout out to those guys. And like I said, if you want to see more on those D3 Players of the Week, fast forward to the Division 3 portion of the episode. But let's talk about the man making some noise out of D2 in the NFL, that being Tyson Bagent, or as you see here, Bagent of Change. It's a little article here, and what it says underneath, even though the Bears did lose to the Vikings, it says, with Fields reverting to his frustrating form before injury, rookie quarterback at least fun to watch in the Bears' loss. At least fun to watch. His final stat line in the matchup, 10 for 14, 83 yards, had an interception late there that kind of iced it. That was too bad. And then also got killed on a strip sack. 2 plays that I'm sure he'll want to forget, but also for a very young quarterback, great learning experiences. Showed a lot of really good stuff number 17 did for Chicago. And just excited to see what his trajectory looks like in the league. His composure is seemingly really solid for a guy who a lot of people kind of doubted the competition level he faced. He seems to be very comfortable back there, making pretty good decisions for the most part. I know he's not perfect with the football, but you can obviously tell I'm rooting for the kid. I did have a little clip I wanted to pull up from his press conference talking about coming in for Justin Fields in this situation. So let's roll that real quick before we get moving forward.
Yeah, excited. Playing football is my job, so I enjoy playing football. So I was excited to get out there. Obviously, butterflies, playing in front of so many people, and the stakes are high, in the NFL. But felt really prepared. Felt like the coaches did a good job of, always preparing all the quarterbacks, week in and week out, just because it's always one play away. So felt good, felt prepared, and excited. Yeah, excited.
Job is to play football. Love to play football. Football guy. There you have it. That's pretty easy. Also, side note, whoever designed these hats, I'm going to need you to just go ahead and, find another occupation. I hope it's not I don't know what's going on with those. Not the best look, but either way, Bagent, pretty composed there, and also wanted to touch on one other guy from the D2 scene that was making some big time plays, that being Craig Reynolds, and he played a big role in the Lions' 20-6 victory over the Buccaneers. And a big part of that is Jahmyr Gibbs inactive for this one. Montgomery getting a ton of carries. All of a sudden, he goes inactive with a seeming shoulder injury there. Reynolds becomes the guy. He gets 10 carries, only 15 yards, not making a ton of work on the ground, admittedly. Did have 2 catches for 28 yards, so got some work out of the backfield. But the one play, and I wish I could show it, but I'm not allowed to pull up the NFL film on here. He comes through on Amon-Ra St. Brown's touchdown and just levels a Buccaneer defender in their defensive secondary. And when you talk about just an energy-infusing play to a Detroit Lions offense that has lived off that kind of energy and grit play all year, shout out Craig, dude. That was so awesome. Him and Amon-Ra shared a really cool moment on the sideline. I just thought that was definitely worth mentioning, being a D2 guy out of Kutztown, putting the lower levels of football on the map. So shout out to Mr. Reynolds over there. Otherwise, let's move on to the D2 slate. We're not going to talk any more about Ferris State and GV. We'll talk a little bit of that with Witt here in a little bit. Indianapolis, number 14 at number 18, Truman State. This, for me, kind of talked about it, GLVC championship implications on the line. Indianapolis, they knew that. 38-17 over the Bulldogs. They were up 21-14 at half. They pulled away. They outscored Truman 17-3 in the second half. And Indianapolis, it was all Greyhounds offensively. Even though the numbers they put up weren't really crazy, it was defensively is where they made a lot of fantastic plays. 2 of them being interceptions against Nolan Hare from Truman. And that, for me, was probably a big sticking point of this. KJ Rudabush had a 48-yard return on the interception, and then you had a couple other guys making some big-time plays. A lot of guys contributing, making plays in the backfield as well for the Greyhounds. The receiving attack was very well split up. Their quarterback, Gavin Suckup, finishes 20 for 30, 212 yards, 3 tuds, and then 1 interception. And then you added a touchdown from John Lewis on the ground for the Greyhounds. And again, looking at the schedule going forward for them, they've got a game at Quincy, which could pose a little bit of a threat for them. Then they're home versus Upper Iowa and McKendree, and then at Southwest Baptist. But they take care of business at Quincy next week, I'm assuming. And then this, it's still a lot of conference play left, but it feels like they've gotten some of the tougher ones out of the way. They look really solid right now, Indianapolis does. Otherwise, Northwest Missouri State at number 21, Missouri Western. Missouri Western putting a lot of teams on notice right now, man. Northwest Missouri State, we do not care. 27-23, Bearcats, proving that they are very much still that team, right? And not only are they still that team, Mike Hohensee is very much still that dude. He was flat out balling, and I've got a good stat to share with you guys here as I pull this up. Let's take a look at this, and that is the wrong picture. There you are. The number 1 active career leader in completion percentage. He has completed, and that text is so small. There it is. 69.7% of his passes. In Division II, he is the best in the country at pass completions, has taken care of the ball at an exceptional rate. So shout out to him. That is an incredible stat that I don't think you actually see very often. Here are some of the active career leaders, and you can see him atop that list, followed closely by some other guys we talked a lot about on this show. John Matoka, Braden Gleason, Jack Strand, following closely behind there for him. And when you look at the overall scene, he sits at number 4 behind a couple different names. Braxton Plunk from Mount Union actually being one of them at 71.4%. Oh my goodness. But shout out to Mike, shout out to the Bearcats. They are certainly back. And while you look at their schedule, they've already dropped, here we have it. They've already dropped 3 games. You lost against Emporia. You lost against Fort Hays in quite the upset. And then you lost at Central Missouri. And probably not looking at a playoff run for the Bearcats this year. You're home this week against Pittsburgh State for your homecoming game. That's crazy. And then you still have teams like Washburn, Nebraska Kearney on the schedule. Will Northwest be out of the playoffs this year? I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably. That's not to say they are not a quality football team. That win over Missouri Western following a really solid performance against a Central Oklahoma team that's pretty solid. This team is still very competent. Missouri Western still has a lot in front of them, but Northwest Missouri State with a very quality win. That's kind of the cliff notes from that one. But let's talk A little bit of Lone Star Conference action. Angelo State over Texas A&M Kingsville. They improved to 4-2, 3-1 in conference play, 38-16. Kind of dominant in this one. They scored 21 in the third quarter. Very good showing offensively from the Rams. Starts with Gerald Gardner at the quarterback position, 13 for 23, 202, and 3 tuds. And then a lot of guys on the ground contributing quite a bit. But once again, Kobe, where's the difference happen? 4 interceptions for Angelo State. You had Onye Orapuba, Carson McCullough Cooper had 2 of them, and then Andrew Pitts, who also led the team with 9 tackles, had an interception as well, had at least 3 or 4 sacks on the day. This Rams defense and defensive secondary have been huge. And we talked about their defensive secondary a little bit earlier in the year, actually, if you do remember, when it comes to Angelo State, because you look at a team like Mines, who came in there and put up 31 points on him, and Matoka, if I do remember correctly, had quite the game. He finished 17 for 34 at 245, and I was very surprised by that because Angelo State is one of the best defensive secondaries in Division II football. They had last year, and this year they certainly are starting to back that up. So Angelo State, look for them to kind of steady the ship as they move forward and see what goes on in the second half of their season. Not to say the season is over with for them, though, because guess what? Homecoming this week versus UTPB could be an offensive shootout for them. We'll see if that high-powered offense from Permian Basin can take on that secondary. Then they're at West Texas A&M. Certainly not a gimme for the Rams. Otherwise, Bemidji State at Wayne State College. We talk a lot more about these teams with Witt a little bit later in the episode, so if you want to hear more about the NSIC picture, definitely fast forward. But Bemidji State picks up the win over a Wayne State team that just took down a solid Duluth squad. So Bemidji, still upper echelon of the conference. Wayne State still kind of that second tier, kind of how things are supposed to lay out. And, I mean, you look at the scoring in this one, it was 27-9 going into the fourth quarter. Bemidji was up. Credit to Wayne State. They do make things interesting and make it a little bit more of a closer matchup at the end there. But Bemidji State still very much that upper squad for me. Brandon Alt had another really solid performance. Bemidji did not do much on the ground, though, which is a little bit alarming. Credit to Wayne State as well. Nick Bond has been filling up the stat sheet every single week. 410 yards for him through the air for the Wildcats. But finally, though, on our D2 slate, before we cover some other games, East Stroudsburg at Westchester in another PSAC matchup. East Stroudsburg 6-1 right now, guys. The Warriors playing out of their mind. 28-14, they get the win over the Golden Rams, I do believe is their mascot over there. 28-14 W for ESU, and yes, they get it done through the air a little bit, but their defense has been stepping up. 2 interceptions for them, and I do believe another takeaway as well. But this East Stroudsburg defense, man, led by Deshaun Dixon, he had 7 tackles, 3.5 TFLs, 2.5 sacks. A lot of guys making plays in the backfield. Had a bunch of different Warriors registering tackles in the backfield in this one. And now this East Stroudsburg team, we talked a little bit about the PSAC on this particular program. Some of their more statement wins, already a win over IUP, the 1 loss coming to Kutztown. Now you've got 2 back-to-back wins over Millersville and Westchester, and you're looking forward to that Shepherd matchup in that California PA those last 2 weeks of the year. This is a very interesting ESU team that, like I said, with a lot of squads, still has everything ahead of them, being at 1 loss. You could argue they could potentially drop one of those 2 games, and depending see how things shake out, they might still be able to make a bid for the playoffs. But if you're ESU and you want a playoff run, you got to win out. You can't lose to Shepherd. You can't lose to California PA or Bloomsburg and the other squads they still have on the schedule. That's, you have to control what you can control, and what you can control is winning football games. So they have to make sure they do that moving forward. I don't have any doubt they're going to be extremely competitive. Otherwise, though, on the D2 slate, looking through, Allen with quite the upset over Albany State. That was one that caught some eyes. Also on the PSAC, though, Lockhaven with their 4th win of the year, 21-13 over Bloomsburg. This Lockhaven team has been putting teams on notice, not only in the PSAC, but across the country. Dan Mulrooney and his coaching staff down there have done some great things with the Bald Eagles. Love seeing the social content they put out. They've reinvigorated that community around a football program that it is, to my knowledge, has kind of been the doormat of that conference. Shout out to Lockhaven. Great to see them getting stuff done. Central Oklahoma picks up a big win over Lincoln. We've got Real tight game between Mercyhurst and Clarion, which Mercyhurst pulls out. Mines looked very good against South Dakota Mines in the Battle of the Nerds. 45-22, they pull out that W. Delta State looking very good offensively. 49-27 over North Greenville ahead of that West Florida matchup. Mars Hill picks up a pretty good W. We talked about Emporia State a little bit. And then Fort Hays, still kind of on a roll, picks up a W over Nebraska. Kearney, Slippery Rock, still dominant. And we'll talk about, don't worry, I didn't forget, we're going to talk about Ouachita Baptist and Harding, also a little bit about Southern Arkansas later on. But that's kind of those are the big notes from this last week. And I guess the final one I did want to mention, Lenore Ryan looked fucking good against Barton. That Lenore Ryan's number 13 in the country right now. 47-3 against what we believed was a quality Barton squad. My goodness. That team is making all the right plays at the right time right now. So very interesting. And then Moorhead wins a shootout over Sioux Falls. And that kind of highlights, I think, some of the bigger matchups from this last week, man. A lot of great stuff D2-wise. But before we get over to the D3 side of things, let's head over to the conversation with Whit from D2Football.com. Now, joining me on the show tonight, this man covers the Northern Sun for D2Football.com, the host of NSIC Weekly, Matt Witwicki. What's going on, Whit?
Good to be on with you, buddy. I like what you guys do. Kind of excited to be on.
Yeah. Appreciate that. It's overdue that we get you on here, I think. I'm excited to get you on here, talk a little ball. We'll talk about some national stuff too, but definitely talking about your conference and what makes that so special. It's been a great year to be a fan of football over there in the Northern Sun.
Yeah, it's a season that we kind of started off a little bit slow, where the big dogs weren't necessarily playing each other every week, and now as we continue on, we're having good contests each week, and it's a question, not if Northern Sun teams are going to make the playoffs, but is there going to be 3? Is there going to be 4? Because there's a lot of parity in the conference towards the top. And that makes it for a real compelling follow for me, for sure.
Absolutely. And we'll get to that later for sure. And that was 4 teams from the conference in the playoffs last year, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And that'd be what? Bemidji, Mankato, was it Wayne and Duluth?
In Winona. You almost got all 4 there, Kobe. Not too bad for just right off the top of your head there. I like that.
Yeah. I'm getting there, and that's something where, like, now today's our first show where we've got great guests in you and Abe. Then we'll have Jimmy come on here and talk some D3 ball. We've got our new NAIA guy, Matthew, who's going to come on here and talk some NAIA ball. And then I feel like we kind of finally get a handle on things. And then I get 3 comments today. Why don't you guys cover JUCO ball? God damn.
Well, yeah, your scope can only be so wide right now, but I'm with you.
It's tough. But let's jump into the national scene a little bit. We talked with Abe, almost exclusively about that Anchor Bone game, but give me kind of just the preliminary thoughts from you and the guys about that contest and any big key takeaways you had from it.
Oh, they played a game this weekend? I missed that.
I think, I don't know if anyone actually promoted it at all.
No, I watched the game, and I mean, great game. I mean, Grand Valley gets out right out of the gate, throwing big punches, taking shots down the field. And, I thought Ferris looked like they just got off Willie Nelson's tour bus at the start of the game there, but, it took them a little while. They were disoriented, and then 35 donut with 12 minutes left to go in the second quarter. And we were on with Scott Wooster, the head coach of Grand Valley, last night, kind of asked him.
Catch a little bit of that.
Yeah, it kind of presents a little bit, Kobe, of a now what? Okay, we're up 35 on the Dragon over here, and at some point we're not going to sleep. They're going to wake up. So let's get this game moving as fast as we can. And all of a sudden, 35-21 at half, and there was a little bit of little things got a little chesty, at halftime between the squads. They had to be separated, and it was kind of like set up drama for the second half. And, I've mentioned that this matchup, each time they play now, it's almost like the Super Bowl of D2. It really is. And so the second half gets going, and, Grand Valley's holding on, and then Ferris gets a little bit closer. And when things got within a touchdown, I was texting with my guy Chuck at D2, and I said, this is going to get a little sticky here for Grand Valley. And you know what, to their credit, when Avery had the big run, I kind of felt like that was the dagger.
Absolutely.
And it was just a huge moment. And I mean, he's just a big fellow to be trying to tackle. He's athletic as heck, and just a really great game between the two and some huge plays. And I think a memorable game for anybody who watched it.
Absolutely. Abe called him the A Train earlier on. I don't know if we can take that nickname away from the man who is the A Train wearing the number 40, right? But the reason that I wore number 40, at least when I was playing, but an honorary A Train, we can give him that, Avery, because like you said, he gets his shoulders square going north and south, and that's a big dude. That's a big load to manage over there. But
that wouldn't be bad seeing Abe take him on one-on-one and practice. I want to see some of those reps, see how that turns out. Yeah,
for that one, him or Anthony over there, that linebacker crew. I mean, they balled out.
Yeah, no doubt.
But moving on the national slate a little bit, talk about a bit of a offensive explosion. These guys did it a little bit differently than Grand Valley over there in Harding with no completed passes. They put up 41 on a Washita defense that we have just simply not seen that before. 41-10, they pick up that win, and seemingly the GAC as a whole. Talk about that one.
Yeah, that was kind of the nightcap. I had a full day watching games, and
I bet.
It was 10-3 at half. It wasn't exactly a modern art masterpiece in the first half. It was a battle of field goals, more like a Earl Shy paint job. But then as we moved on to the second half, Harding was able to kind of get that running game going. They did a few times where they looked like they were doing like a sweep to the right and brought action back to the left and got Wachita 2 times for about 30, 40 yards a pop. And then all of a sudden the dive play for Harding started opening up and getting 5 to 7, 8 yards. And at that point, when you're down a few scores and the other teams run an option on you, that's just not a real fun day for the defense. I mean, it's like trying to get a gorilla off you. And so Harding just kind of kept on with that. Kind of an interesting last minute or so of the game. Harding is up, comfortably 25 points or something like that with under a minute. And they have a chance to take a knee and call it a game at their own 40. Instead, they go ahead and run a reverse that goes for a long score. And it kind of had one of those looks like, is this a little bit of twist in the knife, or what's going on here? And when the coaches, talked a little bit after the game, I don't think they were exchanging recipes. I'll put it that way.
I would have to agree with you on that one. Not to discredit that Harding defense at all either. I mean, you hold that offense 3 of 13 on third down, and so now you have this lethal, I would say, combination of your defense can't get off the field, your offense can't stay on it, and now you're in this everlasting cycle of just, I would assume just pain, like triple option. I've played against enough of those squads, man, that you know exactly what they're going to do. The challenge is go out there and stop it.
And it's like playing a running clock.
Yes.
And then the way Harding does it, it's funny. They basically call the play initially. They come up to the line, they back off, they look at what you're in, they reevaluate everything. And the way it takes them a long drawn out process somehow makes it all worse. But it's pretty entertaining to watch. I mean, the fact that they threw one ball all game, didn't complete any passes, it kind of tells you what you're in for with them.
Absolutely. And then as far as, obviously the conference moving forward, they had 430 yards in the ground the other day. That is just a absurd number. Looking forward, the rest of the conference, I don't want to say blow over games. I do believe they have, was one of the Arkansas squad, the Jennies.
They got Southern Arkansas.
Yeah, Southern Arkansas.
Kobe. Yeah, who's only a one-loss team.
Absolutely.
Just came off a win against Henderson State, which I frankly didn't see coming. And Southern Arkansas can score the football. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. If Southern Arkansas somehow wins that game, don't be shocked if they make the playoffs. I don't want to get ahead of things here, but they don't have a whole lot left on their plate after this Harding game.
Yeah, certainly. A tall task for them, but like you said, if they pulled off that win that over a Henderson team that we've seen already pull out some quality wins this season, then it feels like there's a little bit more parity in that conference, I guess, in particular than I expected going into the year, and maybe more than some others expected. Another one, though, and it's someone who's in the top 10 who was usurped this weekend, West Florida, and that offense that at least against Division II opponents this year has been prolific, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. Let's just say they're ridiculous and not good for opposing defenses. West Alabama didn't care about that at all. They held them to 6 points. They win 10-6. Talk about not exactly an art form out there on the football field, but quite the gritty opposite.
Yeah. When you take a look at this one, just kind of a popcorn fart of a performance for West Florida. All of a sudden, you're expecting Pee Wee and company to really light it up. And, their running game wasn't all that successful. And he just didn't have a real good day, to be real frank. I'm sure he'd tell you the same thing.
Yep.
And, their defense is strong. But, if I take a look at West Florida the last 3 years, they've kind of started a trend where they've gone from 45 points a game, 42 points a game, and now they're at like 33 points a game. And in the Gulf South, your offense is going to have a little bit better firepower than that, because they got a tough game upcoming this week with Delta State, and they're going to have to show well or run the risk of potentially getting themselves kind of on the bubble, which isn't what you would expect from West Florida.
Yeah, and I watched a good portion of that FAMU game, and that defense, the way they were able to bring pressure and get back there to Pee Wee and disrupt them. I think West Alabama might have been taking some notes, because the way they were able to keep that offense off schedule was pretty exceptionally. But the thing that's crazy too is you look at John Giles' stat line: 7 catches for 147. The dude, under whatever circumstances, just manages to be the number one guy over there. And it was funny because when we had Pee Wee on just a couple weeks prior to these performances, I asked him, I'm like, and he gave me a very correct coach speak type of answer, but I asked him, who's the guy in this room that's separating them? Now that you lose Durden, who was the dude over there, who's been separating themselves as wide receiver one? He gave me the, everyone's got their own specific. He could have just said it was John, man, right there, straight out. Did he probably know that? Who knows?
He's been one of the top wideouts nationally this year. He
Yep.
transferred in from Virginia Union. And the challenge is, though, if you take a look at this last contest, Kobe, is they weren't able to complete many passes to anybody else. And so that challenge comes into play as well. And, they kind of live by throwing the ball down the field a little bit. When you take a look, his average yards, per is pretty good. And so when they're not able to hit those shots downfield, they're not necessarily kind of that short precision offense where they're just kind of chipping you here and there. And just a real tough day at the office for them.
No, 100%, man. I would agree with that. And that defense, when you have a defense like that, the way they've been able to saturate that D line with some top transfer talent from around D2, a couple of those guys being GLIAC guys that we saw shipped down there under Coach Mello, who was also at Davenport. You can see the ties kind of in there, dragging down some of that top talent. But when you have a defense like that, you're going to be in every game. It's just a matter of is that offense gonna show up. And as of late, we just don't know. I'm sure, like you kind of said, though, they're going to bounce back. They're going to be making plays. We know they're going to be they're going to have more than enough motivation for this weekend when it comes to playing Shegog and company, who are going to put up points on the ground and in the air as well.
Outstanding upcoming game, no doubt about it.
No, I'm pumped for that one. But let's take a dive into the NSIC a little bit more now in particular. Mankato, Bemidji, still top dogs. Both made their way back into the top 10 now, I do believe. Bemidji cracked back in at number 9, is it now?
Yep.
So feels good to probably see them back up there. I think between them, GLIAC, and I guess, West Florida. West Florida's out of it now, correct?
Well, they're still in the mix because that game that they had against FAMU won't count against them for playoff selection purposes.
Yes, I'm just talking in terms of the D2 kind of top 10. I was going to say Gulf South represented, but
for the top 10, it kind of depends on which one you're looking at, of course.
True.
Because obviously we've got our own. You have obviously the coaches version of it.
Yep.
And in ours, we essentially have Mines, Grand Valley, Pitt, Mankato, Ferris, Delta, Harding, Slippery Rock, Bemidji, and Benedict. Mm-hmm. And I got to be real frank with you. I took a little bit of exception to the coaches poll. I'm not afraid to say it. They have Ferris number 9. There's not 8 other teams in this country who can beat Ferris State. I'm just putting that out there with an exclamation point. We have them at 5. We dropped them out of the top spot, obviously, but
of course,
let's not kid ourselves. This is still a really good Ferris State team.
Absolutely. I, seeing the wrong end of a 78-3 victory on the Bulldogs' behalf, I would have to go on your side and believe that. The things they're able to do personnel-wise, whether it be offensively or defensively, are some things that, we talk about on this show a lot, that Division II teams in general are not able to do. The depth that squad has, especially in the trenches, the way they're able to dominate the line of scrimmage, for the most part. We've seen exceptions to that so far this year with some top-tier competition. But like you said, no doubt through the rest of this year, that team is going to be playing with 8 chips on their shoulder. I don't know
Don't
if they
be
need
counting
anymore.
them out. Yeah,
No.
don't count them out, Kobe.
Absolutely not. Hey, you ain't got to tell me, man. You absolutely do not. But on to Mankato, on to Bemidji. Mankato, still very much that team, that top dog in the conference. They finish Bemidji in what was a very close one here just a couple weeks ago. I guess kind of the biggest point for me from them the last 2 weeks, I think Wayne Cavati, in one of his articles had said it, is that Shem Butler Lawson Jr. looked human. And his stat lines haven't been jumping off the page. Still big contributions. We had him on the show. I absolutely love talking to him. But that running attack from them, maybe not quite as potent, at least, as what we had seen those first couple weeks.
Yeah, I got a chance to see Shen week 1, and I chatted with him after the game. And he's something. I mean, trying to catch him in space. I mean, and he's a physical runner, and he's kind of the best of both worlds. But he's had a little bit of a downturn here in the last few weeks. He had 4 fumbles within the span of a 2-week window. And then obviously he's been under 100 yards each of the last 2 contests.
Yeah.
I think teams are frankly keen on him.
Absolutely.
And because Mankato is not dynamic through the air. They've got some great athletes on the outside, and they'll throw some fades and things of that sort. But I think teams are saying, you know what, we would rather you have to beat us that way than just letting you run through the middle. And you look at Moorhead, for example, who's not known for being a great defensive team. Moorhead 2 weeks in a row, whether it's Mankato or this game against Sioux Falls, both defended the middle and said everything else may happen, but it's not going to be in the middle. And I think Mankato kind of stuck with the run game against them a little bit. I'm still not convinced that Mankato won't be able to have a lot of success with Sheen the rest of the year. But right now, it's kind of a little bit of a pause with regard to his production.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned Moorhead there. They're, to me, the anomaly in this conference right now. You look at, I wanted to talk about Bemidji and their passing attack because they are second in the conference right now with Alt back there. He's been having, obviously, a kind of career year last year and has built on that this year. He's had some very great games, but Moorhead is just that, at least in the passing attack, on some kind of steroid. I don't even know. The way I reacted to that box score against Mankato and what Strand and company have been able to do over there, when, like we talked about earlier, you know what's coming, good luck, because they are airing the ball out. I'm surprised his arm doesn't just fall off halfway through one of these contests.
Yeah, watching Jack Strand and his group of receivers, none of which are, I don't even think 6 foot tall. They just go and they battle for 50-50 balls. They fight like crazy. They know that they're going to get the ball a lot because when they run the ball, it's basically almost where they see such a light box that they feel like they have to go do that. But otherwise, they're going to throw the ball on you. And this last week, they were in a dogfight with Sioux Falls. They were down a point at half, and they only had 3 first downs the whole first half. Then they lit up the skies the whole second half. And, it's kind of like one of those, if you don't get them right away, they're going to keep coming at you. And they're really impressive to watch. And Steve Lockway does a heck of a job with his squad. He basically makes it, Kobe, a game of 7-on-7 is really what he does. No,
that's kind of what it felt like watching it, and the way that, I guess when you drop back 60 plus times a contest, you're going to get pretty comfortable in that pocket, but that's what he looks like. I mean, against a really premier defense, you sit back there with that level of composure and you're just slinging the ball around, not only slinging it, the amount of turnovers he's had for that many pass attempts.
Right.
I mean, knock on everything, but that is incredible. That's incredible to watch. We talked a little bit about the parity at the top and that top tier of the conference. Moving down, though, from the kind of Mankato and Bemidji's who seem to have separated themselves a bit, you look at teams like a Duluth, like a Augustana, like a Wayne. And I saw, I guess on the stream, but as far as watching my team goes up close and personal, Wall Jasper and what he's been able to do with his feet on the ground. That Duluth team, still very much a scary foe, even after a little bit of a surprise loss to Wayne State.
Yeah, we mentioned Avery Moore earlier from Grand Valley. For people who are in Michigan, there is another version of that in Minnesota, and it's Kyle Waljasper. Except Kyle Waljasper might be a little wider than him.
Little shorter, little wider. Think same amount of space, just compacted.
Yeah, he might have a little more Abe Swanson build in him.
Yes.
And but when he comes around the corner, there's not a lot of safety signing up for that duty. So But Duluth right now, they lost to Wayne State. I think that you could take Wayne State. I think you could also take Duluth and Augustana and all kind of put them real tight in that second tier. Now, Augustana currently is unbeaten, but they also haven't beaten anybody who's kind of like one of those top end teams. They haven't played anybody in that group yet. Now they will this weekend. I'm going to be heading on across town over to that game. I live in Sioux Falls, so it's an easy trip for me.
Sweet.
So I'm really interested to see the physicality that Mankato is going to bring against a team like Augustana, who can really chuck it, but are also physical up front as well. They just haven't proven it to the extent that a Mankato has in terms of long, playoff runs and so forth.
Is this going to be another year where we see, not automatic, but assuming Mankato and Bemidji are going to make it into the postseason, this is going to be another year where we see 3 or 4 of these teams out of the conference that get bids?
If I were to put my crystal ball out there, because we're not far from getting regional rankings, which is
very
kind of
close.
where I think we're about a week away, where they start kind of putting at this moment in time, what would the playoff picture look like? And it's every week, it's your resume to that moment. If I were looking at the crystal ball in Super Region 4, which includes the teams down in Texas, the teams in Colorado, and then my conference, the Northern Sun, I think you're looking at Mines is going to be the number 1 seed. I think you're going to look at West Colorado, who has undefeated right now, still has to play Mines.
Yep.
I think they're going to make it. So that's 2 teams out of 7 right there. And I think that there's going to be 2 teams that make it from the Lone Star as well, would be my guess. I'm going to say a Permian Basin, and then either Angelo or Central Washington.
I have
agree.
A feeling. I think that's a great pick. We had the chance to have Coach McCullough on here, and what he's been able to do with that team down there is nothing short of special. Yeah,
they're kind of like the new hot chick at the dance. And
they kind of are, man. They didn't know what to expect from them coming into this year, and now they're hot on the scene. They got a barber shop in the football facility. I mean, this place is going somewhere.
But then that leaves me then with, I think, maybe only 3 Northern Sun teams.
Okay.
I think 4 could make it, but I think you've nailed down, Kobe, the top 2, in my opinion, and that's Mankato and that's Bemidji. I do think they're a little bit of a cut above. Then who's going to be that next team? Because Augustana's got a slate of tough games coming up. So it's either going to be an Augustana, a Wayne State. Right off the bat, I'm looking at those 2, but Duluth is not one to count out. So that's where I think we're going to, kind of see that makeup. If somebody from the Lone Star really falters in that group we mentioned, then maybe we're looking at 4 teams from the NSIC.
Absolutely. And the team that, I thought might have been in the conversation, at least even a couple weeks ago, is that Texas A&M Kingsville team that's taken a couple tough losses, especially with their defense, their defensive secondary that's been, I think, talked about a lot in that conference. They've been almost pushed to the side, and I think UTPB had a big part to play in that, and another squad down there in West Texas that we've talked about a bit on this program that has been on the wrong end of a couple ridiculously close games. So the competition's been great in that conference, and certainly no givens for them. But Whit, that's all I got from you, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I had a blast talking to you.
Hey, great having you on. Good luck with everything, buddy.
Of course. I appreciate it. Have a good night. Some Week 7 recaps. D3 side of things. Talk D2. We talked a lot of D2 ball that day, Jim. But D3 side, and then we'll get to NAIA a little bit later. But first of all, fun one for the Blue Devils this weekend, huh?
Yeah, we took down the Pointers, 51-14. It was a good team win. A lot of guys got involved, so you love to see that for sure.
That's big, dude. Every team needs one like that, where just things go right. You guys are playing the way you're supposed to. Everything's clicking, especially offensively for you guys. Made a lot of plays, so big time. Other big WIAC battles, though. By the way, I saw a little poll on Twitter about WIAC. WIAC has definitely had the overwhelming majority pronunciation-wise.
Yeah, WIAC is certainly the way you say it. I can promise you.
That's funny. But where do you want to start? I mean, probably with Whitewater, I imagine.
Yeah, so obviously, undefeated River Falls hosted Whitewater last weekend, and they're now no longer undefeated. Whitewater came in there, and they ran the ball really well. 21-14 victory for the Warhawks. Alec Ogden had himself a nice game. 253 total yards, 2 touchdowns for him. And, Tamir Thomas, again, 68 yards, touchdown. Every game he's due for an end zone trip. He's just a really good player. When you run the ball well and you manage the game well, you're going to win the game a lot of the time. Like we've said on this podcast a million times, and Whitewater does that really well. So, expect them to continue to have a pretty solid rest of the way here. And then Caleb Blaha for River Falls also ran for 100 and a touchdown. So, you got
He's a stud. Like he is
well.
a
Yeah.
budding superstar over them for the Falcons, man. Like he's
Yeah.
been playing at a very consistent clip too. Like this is not an off game. Like I gotta say off. This is not like an exceptionary game for him. This is what he does. It feels like.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm sure he wanted to have the victory more than anything else, but 100 yards on the ground as a quarterback is still pretty impressive.
It is, dude. And talking about Ogden a little bit more, at least under center for the Warhawks, doesn't feel like he's a guy who's going to fill up the stat book every week. You know what I mean? You talked about being able to manage the game. And I'm not going to use the word game manager when talking about a quarterback that doesn't necessarily have incredible stats. I don't like when people use that typically. But the way in which he facilitates their offense, I think makes a lot of sense. And not to mention, he actually got a lot done on the ground. He had 17 carries, which I believe is a little bit more than we're probably used to seeing him tote the rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did see that as well. That's why I threw in the total yards, because I think he ran for like a lot. Actually, I'd have to look, but he ran for 73. Yeah, that's a lot of yards for Corey. I think he was their leading rusher, actually.
He was. Yeah, Jameer Thomas was actually second there after him.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sure he's been giving him crap all week, like, oh, I have more rushing yards than you.
Yeah, I don't.
As a quarterback and the running back, it's just kind of funny.
You think so?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's good. But yes, Thomas still the leading rusher in the conference right now, followed closely by Blaha from River Falls. Tamir still has over 100 yards per game. That is a very impressive stretch that he's been on. Seems to be the kind of bell cow, I guess, of that Whitewater offense. And for me, what's impressive about this too is it's a pretty wire-to-wire victory. At halftime, it was 15-7. They maintain the lead. They score again in the third. River Falls scores one with still quite a bit of time to go in the fourth quarter. It was 13 minutes left. All of a sudden, to make it interesting, make it a one-score game, and you didn't really know where this was going to end up. But at the end of the day, Whitewater defense and offense stay on the field. They get it done. And for the Warhawks, after these, this stretch of really tough, that gauntlet of games, it feels like they've really leveled out entirely as a team. And what's the stat that we love to look at, Jim? You talked about it a little bit. Time of possession, 38 minutes to just almost 22. For the Warhawks, obviously, in favor of that one. When your offense can stay on the field, your defense can stay off of it, it spells very good things for your football team. While they weren't incredibly efficient on offense, 4 of 14 from third down is kind of a stat that jumps out to me right away.
Wow,
they got it done on
that
special
stat,
teams, and it was really an all facets win for the Warhawks.
Yeah. I mean, when you go 4 for 14 on third down, actually, it's kind of interesting how they pulled that one out. But again, to do the time possession, being able to run the ball well, I'm sure. But wow, 4 for 14, that's pretty low for Whitewater, I would say.
Yeah, and Ogden right now sits actually at number 6 out of 9 in the conference as far as passing leaders are concerned. So that passing attack for the Warhawks has not been something that has been incredibly potent. And I do feel receiving-wise, and I guess I can look at some of the actual stats here, there's not a Whitewater receiver on this list until number 16 in Stephen Hine. And, Tommy Coates is on there as well. It feels like they kind of distribute the ball pretty well if you're Whitewater. I don't know, Jimmy, if they have a true wide receiver one over there or someone who's really separated himself from the pack and identified himself as like a legitimate week-in, week-out playmaker for the Purple guys.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it kind of surprises me that they don't really throw the ball as much, because we run the same offense as they do.
Okay.
Like our Whitewater's offensive coordinator was at Stout before, and we kind of run something pretty similar.
Okay.
Like the steals and everything. So it's kind of interesting that they're not really throwing the ball as much. I didn't really notice that in the stats, but yeah.
Yeah, and Ogden did have the one pick this game, which obviously made things interesting, but a big piece for this Whitewater defense, they had 3 interceptions. And again, the turnover battle, the time possession. We look at it for every game. It's like we sound like a broken record, dude. But when you have 3 interceptions, you have that kind of time possession. That's just the way the game's going to go. But let's talk a little bit about that lacrosse squad, huh?
Yeah, and story of the game again, Jack Studer, 158 yards receiving and a touchdown. That kid's been having a heck of a season. He had a good game against us. He's been having good games all year. And then obviously, lacrosse pulled that one out over Platteville. It was a tough team. Platteville's always good. The Pioneers, 21-17 in that one. Mike Priami for Platteville, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns for Platteville. He did throw 2 picks. I'm sure that may have had something to do with them losing. But, I mean, again, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, still a heck of a game for the kid. But when you lose the turnover battle, it's going to be tough to pull victories out.
Low scoring game, definitely defensive battle. Look at the net rushing yards for these guys in this one. 36 yards for Platteville, 23 for La Crosse. And so for me, Platteville being able to keep, obviously Gabe Lynch at the running back spot, but more so Kaiser Helterbrand, what we've seen him be able to do with his legs more so than his arm. He was slinging it, took care of the ball as well, over 200 yards and a touchdown of the day in the air. Zach Weir also came in there through another tud. But Kaiser on the ground, they were able to hold him in check, I think, a lot better than other opponents have been in the past. And Coach Janis just last episode talked about that defensive front for Platteville, guys like Blazik and these other guys in the defensive secondary even that are great up in the run fit and what they were able to do. I think it's safe to say he had a good grasp on what they were going up against in Platteville. Platteville made that one probably way more interesting than people were expecting.
Yeah, I don't think they surprised anybody in the WIAC, but maybe nationally. But
that's very true. Very true. People who maybe weren't familiar.
Well respected in our conference, and I'm not surprised at all. They kept this one close. I wouldn't have been surprised if they won the game either, to be very frank with you. But yeah.
Two guys on that front, Justin Blazik and Tyler Bacon, are 2-4 in the conference right now for tackles for loss, making some big-time plays in the backfield of those opponents. But still, solid win for La Crosse. There's in a league like the WIAC, there's obviously no givens. We say it a lot. But for them, looking forward now, they certainly don't get a break. They're back at home versus with Oshkosh, and we'll talk about probably that matchup later this week. But still, Oshkosh and River Falls both on the schedule, man. Like, big-time matchups coming up for the Eagles.
Yeah, they definitely have some uphill climbing to do for sure. And then being 5-1 now too, you have a lot of opportunities to take down good teams and prove your worth to get into the playoffs as well. So
totally, another 5-1 squad,
along with maybe winning the conference too. I mean, at 5-1, they can kind of control their own destiny at this point.
That is true. You're 100% right. But another 5-1 squad, and one that also eked out a very surprisingly close game, being Hardin-Simmons over Texas Lutheran. It's a 5-point game against a team that's 1-5 and whose offense has just not been able to put a whole lot of points on the board. What did you see from that one?
I saw Noah Garcia had a heck of a game on the ground. 111 rushing yards and a touchdown for Noah and the Hardin-Simmons. What was their mascot, Kobe?
It's a bulldog.
The Bulldog. Okay, the Bulldogs. That's right. And then Basenko for Texas Lutheran, 97 rushing yards, touchdown. Falling short, obviously, but a valiant effort at that. 27-22 against a really good football team. They can definitely pat themselves on the back a little bit for that game. And then obviously, right back to it this week for Texas Lutheran, as well as Hardin-Simmons. I know Hardin-Simmons can't be looking too far ahead, but not this week, but the week after is the Mary Hardin-Baylor game. And that's okay. That's one that's definitely going to be talked about. I have a feeling that's going to be the Division I Rejects game of the week. I just have a funny feeling. I don't know.
Well, I don't think that's a crazy take, man. That's ASC. I would assume ASC championship implications for that one, even given the start that UMHB has had, and we can kind of, transition over to that while we're talking about it. They pick up a win over Sul Ross, a decent squad who's picked up a couple wins this year. And now Sul Ross, in their last year of being a Division III team, they're making the move up to Division II this next year. I believe we had talked about that in a previous episode. But 37-13 over Sul Ross. And now you had kind of mentioned it, the offense for Hardin-Baylor. Obviously, the defense coming on too, but the offense, more importantly, I think, finally finding their rhythm. They scored in every quarter of this one. They led by a pretty narrow margin at half, but then outscored them 21-0 in the second half to just absolutely put this one away. And UMHB feels like they're finally finding their rhythm, dude.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody should be surprised that they're finding their rhythm.
No,
I think you can go back and probably look. You and I had said, they started 0-3, but there's a very good chance they go 7-3 and make the playoffs and win the conference. Being that they played so many hard teams in the non-conference, they set themselves up to maybe have some tough games, but it gets them ready for the conference play. And now look at them, they've won 3 in a row. They're cruising. I'm just really excited for that game next week, man. I'm really excited for that one.
No, it's gonna be huge, and looking at it right now, UMHB is actually the top 2 offense in the ASC, ahead of teams like Hardin-Simmons and Sul Ross State. Howard Payne actually being number 1 right now, and you could argue their strength of schedule hasn't been incredible, but looking at the rushing attack, I think is where Hardin Simmons kind of separates themselves. They've been really good on the ground this year. So we'll see if UMHB, I mean, we're looking forward, but we'll see if they're able to handle that one. But we can talk about our D3 game of the week, that being the Alma win over Hope. And, some people had asked, why was the Whitewater River Falls game not? Totally could have been. It literally could have. That was a fantastic game. The lacrosse game, honestly, like all these games, like all could have been our selection. One, this game for me was MIAA championship. Like this was for the conference, and an undefeated Hope team against a perfect Alma team. Who's going to come out on top? Felt very similar to last year's matchup between Alma and Albion when they kind of came into that matchup, both perfect and unblemished on the year. Alma shows absolutely no doubt in this one. It was a game, certainly at halftime, 14-10, the Scots led, but they scored 14 in the third, and I think just put away Hope right there. And for me, that's kind of what separates this one from some of those WAC contests is these two perfect teams. We didn't really know how this was going to shake out. Hope had two quarterbacks throw for over 100 yards. Had an interesting system they had going on there with Zach Trainer, who's been the typical starter, and Ben Wellman over under center there. Carter St. John, though, for Alma, not the typical day we'd expect from him stat-wise. He was 14 for 24, 149 yards, no touchdowns in the air. He did have one on the ground. He had 6 carries and 81 yards. But, not the stat-padding day that we've seen from him. He was our player of the week just a few weeks ago, if you do remember. And this Alma team is looking poised once again to make a playoff run. If you remember, they got bounced by Aurora, and I do believe, was it the second round last year?
Yeah.
So... yeah. I mean, I'm sure the rhetoric around there with Coach Couch and company is like, take the next step, right? Like set the bar even higher and achieve even more. But any other takeaways from this one for you?
No, I mean, obviously, that was a big one for the conference. I mean, just a huge game. And then obviously, sure this gets said in every single film room on Sunday morning is the 24-hour rule, right? You enjoyed the win, but then right when that clock hits Monday morning, it's like, okay, like we're on to next week. We're watching the new film, so.
Yeah, not to say that was Alma certainly has games to play. Again, I don't want to overstate that at all, but when you look ahead, you have Kalamazoo, Olivet, Adrian, who certainly are not having the greatest of years. They do finish at Albion College, who is, I believe, receiving votes right now. And if we look at
that game's not going to be a cakewalk by any means. We had Albion's film last week because they played against Stevens Point there. That's a pretty good football team.
No, they still are, and I think
they got some good playmakers on that offense.
With Rundle taking the helm there after Bureau leaving for Northwood, I think a lot of people probably counted them out, the Britons over there. We had the chance to have their offensive line coach on here just recently, who was a fantastic conversation. Definitely go find that one if you missed it. But they're sitting at 5-1 right now, and they've got some quality wins, man. Carthage College in the opener, taking them down was seriously a statement game for them. And, their games have not really been terribly close. Hope did knock them off last week, so that was kind of the tough take for them as far as conference play is concerned. But no, Albion certainly will have a chance to run the table, and we'll see if they can make that last week interesting against Alma in the MIAA championship. So again, I keep acting like the season's already wrapped up, but in my opinion, that was like MIAA championship type of week right there between Hope and Alma. But another game here. We talked about the goals a good bit on this show, especially after the game winner. But Endicott, they play a really close one. And number 18 or 20, depending on what poll you're looking at, against unranked Western New England, man, 24-21. They pull it out.
I mean, I'm sure Western New England was not – there's no such thing as moral victories, obviously. But when you play a team as tough as Endicott like that, you got to be feeling like, okay, we got something here. You know what I mean? Falling a little short, but, they know that they could build off of this throughout the rest of the season. And Endicott, pretty good win as well. They just try to keep rolling. Are they undefeated?
Who's that?
Endicott.
I don't know. They dropped the game to I'm blanking. Hold on, I can pull it up here real quick.
Yeah, I want to say because they're ranked, but I think they might be 5-1 or 6-1. I don't know.
They dropped the game to Ithaca. That's right, week 2.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, 20-17. Ithaca was number 18 at the time. I do remember that. Yeah, so that was the one game they've dropped. And looking ahead for them, they're at Nichols this week, and then at Hudson, Curry, and University of New England. So, that Hardin-Simmons game was a big-time schedule for them. I don't think people realize how big that was because of the strength of their conference maybe not being up to par with some of the ones around them in that region. the win like that is what's going to separate you and give you that kind of playoff bid.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Absolutely.
though, I think we had kind of one more, and we can touch on maybe a couple few. But the last one I really want to talk about was that Cortland game against was it Alfred, correct?
Yep.
And the defense from the Saxons, I think we have talked about a little bit on this show, but Cortland did not seem to care. They scored 59. 59-21 is the final. And under center, Zach Boyce for the Red Dragons has been ridiculously efficient. 19 for 22, 186, 3 tuds for the kid. And that's honestly not even the stat line that we're used to seeing from him. We're used to seeing even more. But still, he gets it absolutely done. And a really great offensive performance when you consider that the last 2 games, this Alfred team has conceded 16 points the last 2 games, and now Cortland's going to come in and put up 59 on their head. That is a really impressive feat, dude.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that quarterback stat line as well, like 19 for 22 is spectacular. Like you don't just go 19 for 22. Like that's pretty darn.
No, no, you don't. You do not.
Yeah. For sure.
I love it. And that final score of 59-21 is a little bit deceiving in itself. It was 56-7, dude, at one point. And they get a couple garbage time tuds, it looks like. This game was put away and put away relatively early by Cortland, who it just seems to get probably better and better every week. And looking out to what they have these next couple of weeks, they still do have a couple big ones on the schedule. They're at St. John Fisher, which should be potentially an interesting one, at Hartwick, and then they close out the year on 2 really great ones at home versus Brockport for their senior day, and finally the Corsica Jug game at Ithaca November 11th to close out the year is going to be, I would assume, must-watch TV, must-see TV if you're any type of fan of D3 football.
Yeah, that'll definitely be something, again, we talk about on the show. I mean, certainly.
Absolutely. Otherwise, some quick notes here. Muhlenberg, 41-13 over Gettysburg. They get that one. Ithaca, number 15, pulls out kind of a close win over Union, 17-9. Susquehanna was dominant in their game, 56-0. Delaware Valley, still quietly putting together a really solid season. They've been at the bottom part of that top 25 D3 football rankings for a while. They trounced FDU Florham 20-0. That defense shows up. Johns Hopkins had a little bit of a scare, 34-27 over Franklin and Marshall, Mount Union continuing to take care of business. So are a couple of the other top dogs. St. John's kind of did the same thing. North Central still just dominant. I can't wait for these guys to really dig in and play some playoff football, man. I think we need it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think North Central hasn't really had like a huge challenge. Maybe
we thought it would be
Wheaton was a pretty big one, but they handled it pretty well. But I mean, I'd love to see North Central play like a Whitewater or like a Wartburg or teams like that, or like even like River Falls or so.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're waiting for that because right now, looking at the games in their conference, it's just ain't doing it for me, man. It just ain't doing it for me.
Yeah.
But we can look. I want to pull these guys up and talk a bit about. Let's see if this will work for me. No, that's not going to work. But here we can talk about this guy. Some of the players of the week here, and I'll go fast forward over to our D3 guys that we can talk about. Did you get a chance to look at these earlier in our posts?
Yeah, I did see those.
So a couple interesting selections here, which maybe from an outsider's perspective, but Keon Jones from Western Connecticut and from Franklin, Garrett Cora, 2 teams that we certainly do not talk a whole lot about in this program. But Keon, he throws 462 yards on 17 passes, and he was 17 for 36. So, maybe you come after me for making that selection, me and the guys who make the picks. But for me, no turnovers, right? You don't see an interception on there. So, yeah, a lot of incompletions, but when he's completing the ball, they are big-time plays. He accounts for 6 touchdowns in total offense on the day. And I couldn't take out Garrett Cora, dude. 30 carries for 319 yards and 4 tuds. I don't care who you're playing. That stat line's ridiculous.
Whoa. 3-9, dude, that could be like a season stat line.
Literally, dude. So we had players of the week, co-players offensively, because I certainly just could not decide between these 2.
Yeah, and like another thing, like 462 yards. I don't care what your completion attempts are. Like I don't care if you throw for 462, you throw for 462.
And like I said, with no interceptions, like no turnovers, that's what for me was like a big deal.
It's crazy. It's wild.
Defensively, moving over here. We're looking at Tony Skinner from Randolph-Macon, and that's 4 tackles, a TFL, a fumble recovery, 2 picks for the kid on the day. And I do believe they picked up, I'll have to pull it up here, but I do believe they picked up a win this last week as well.
Yeah, they've been cruising. I saw their schedule earlier.
They have been. Yeah, they picked up a 38-3 win at Bridgewater. These games for them, man, have not been anywhere near close. And looking at the rest of their schedule, dude, they might not have a whole lot of competition through the last, 4 weeks or so of the season.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I don't know. But kind of similar to North Central. They just don't really.
Yeah, we'll see, man. We will see. But finally, special teams wise, as far as that's concerned, Andre Green, from Gallaudet, he had a 91-yard kick return for a touchdown in their big win, and that one was a lot closer than some of these other games that we've covered. I'll pull up the final score here quickly. But his kick return was definitely a big part of that win. They win by 1 point at Castleton, 24-23, Jim. And like I said, that could not have come at a better time. They were down 23-3 when he returns that one for a touchdown, makes the game 23-10 with only 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they come back. They're able to, take the lead with just under 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and find that win. So the timing of that one, the impact play that had in the game, I thought that was huge for them.
Yeah, I think you made the right choice.
Yep. Sweet, dude. But yeah, I'm excited to see what this weekend has in store, man. And I at this point, I've already talked about it in the podcast, but how about Bagent getting his first touchdown for the Bears?
I know. That's pretty sweet. I know that.
A couple other plays that you might want to forget, but the touchdown was cool.
Yeah, still cool. Yeah, for sure.
Sweet. That's all I got for you, dude. I appreciate you, as always, man.
Yeah, man. You know.
All right, brother. I'll see you. Have a good night.
All right. Later.
Last but not least, on the show tonight, for the first time, joining us, our new NAIA Insider. I don't know if we need like a little drum roll or anything, but from the other side of the country, man, out in Oregon, Dakota Wesleyan alum, Matthew Schwarzer. What's going on, brother? I'm glad to have you join us. Like, I seriously am excited to have you be a part of this.
Yeah, appreciate it. Glad to be on the show, man. It's I'm really excited about this. It's really cool to put the NAIA on notice. I feel like a lot of people just kind of dismiss this level of football. There's a lot of cool stuff to talk about, though. I guess for me, obviously, you hinted at it. I'm a Dakota Wesleyan alum. I played fullback, tight end there for 4 years. Graduated this past May, originally from Tacoma, Washington. Yeah, neck roll and everything. It was
no shit. Are you serious?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I got pictures.
I gotta get some flicks of that. Dude. That was awesome.
Yeah, neck roll and all. But yeah, spent 4 years there. Absolutely loved it. Graduated, moved out to Portland, Oregon, where I am living my best life and covering NAIA football on the NAIA F-Ball podcast. If anybody in the sphere has seen that, do a show with Corey Thorpe there every Monday. So yeah, good stuff. It's
big time. Like, not new to this. True to it.
Not new to this. I am a big NAIA truther. Been around the block a few times,
Yeah. New to us, not new to the scene at all, man. But no, I'm definitely gonna need some visual confirmation on that neck roll. That's badass.
Yeah, I'll get some too, man. I got some.
As when I was coming back, at least trying to come back and be healthy, I was on my equipment manager's ass every day. Like, let me just get one of those, man. He's like, you don't have any neck problems. I'm like, man. I come in the next day. I'm talking to my trainer. I'm like, man, I've been having this stinger on the left. You know what I mean? I've been having this stinger on the left side. It just feels like I need to have my neck immobilized. You know what I mean? But they never gave me one. Alas.
Yeah, I kind of had to work some magic to get it, which involved going into the equipment shed after practice. But we do what we can.
I love it, dude. Oh, dude. But let's talk some matchups as far as this past weekend from the NAIA scene, and we'll also get into our players of the week here in a little bit. But do you want to start with this Friends Southwestern game, dude?
Yeah, so across the board in the NAIA this week, it was not as exciting as weeks past have been. I feel like there's been a lot of chaos in the NAIA this year. But one of the matchups that really stood out was Friends versus Southwestern. Southwestern came into this game ranked 6th in the country, leading the KCAC. They are traditionally a very good football squad. And Friends kind of coming out of nowhere this year. They have a second-year head coach who's really been able to get some things done. And I mean, they're rolling right now. They're 6-1, and they get a big 2-score win over a Southwestern team, running the triple option, no less. This is like a year and a half under this new head coach, and they've been running the triple option really well. And this Friends team is, don't let the name deceive you. They are an absolute powerhouse. They are mean. They are nasty.
I love it.
and they just get it done. And honestly, for some historical context, Friends is usually not very good. This is a team that is on the up and up. Obviously, with the newer head coach, you can kind of expect that they've been down for a little bit. And people expected this Friends team for it to take like, 2, 3, 4 years to get it rolling. They're not even finished with year 2, and they are already on top of the conference. They are absolutely bullying teams. Their only loss was to, I can't remember, but it was one of the better teams in the NAIA.
Kansas Wesleyan, and they lost by a touchdown.
Yeah, and Kansas Wesleyan is leading their side of the KCAC right now, and traditionally a very good squad, so that's not a bad loss to have at all. Yeah, they just bullied Southwestern. Like, Southwestern played well, all things considered, but man,
not
Friends
enough.
Just not enough. I mean, scoreboard shows it. Both teams did really well on third down, converting most of the time, but Friends was just able to run it down the throat.
Dude, yeah, and you talked about the triple option. It's crazy, too, when you say the coaching staff has only been there for so long, and to go personnel-wise and schematically to make that switch over and to, like, fully buy into this new scheme. Typically, you don't have the dudes that can just embrace that kind of change. They could have been in a totally different situation there. The guys buy in, but talk about such a change. I don't know what they ran in the past before that, but anything from going to that to a triple option, it just takes a lot of buy-in. And when you have a guy like Cavante Baker, it makes it a little bit easier. He threw 4 passes on the day for 119 yards. 2 of them were made their way into the end zone, and then he gets it done on the ground, 24 carries for another 122 and 2 tuds. That'd be why he was our player of the week. And also, when you talk about, like you and I had discussed before, the implications of this game to the actual start of conference play over a team that was receiving all those votes in the top 10, it doesn't become more of a statement game for this Falcon squad, man.
Oh, absolutely. And going forward, they have some tough games, but to get a win like this is huge. And you mentioned it, Cavante Baker, man. Holy cow. That dude was pretty much unstoppable this entire game. You get a guy, especially in the triple option, and you mentioned that it takes buy-in. Not only does it take buy-in, but the triple option takes a while to get down. Yes. Timing-wise, a feel, you got to have the right guys in there. And they're just rolling with it, man. Obviously, Cavante leading the charge there. He's clearly fit for the position. Yeah. So he's making it work really well. And on the other side of the ball, too, this Friends defense is nothing to scoff at, holding a usually pretty solid Southwestern offense to only 20 points is pretty impressive. So
totally. And on the special team, it was all facets of the game for them as a complete whole. Cole Thompson, he hit one from 49. Dude, I didn't realize that in the first look through the box score. That is ridiculous. He was 2 for 2 on field goals in the day. The first one, more of a chip shot from 20, but that 49-yarder, I don't know what the conditions were like. I don't care, to be honest with you. That is impressive as hell. And for me, looking at the schedule, I guess, for these guys moving forward, you mentioned the Kansas Wesleyan squad, a quality team. That is their one loss. But as far as the conference play goes, it feels like these next 2 weeks probably going to be the biggest 2 for these guys. Looking 2 on the road in Missouri and Kansas with, is it Evangel?
Yeah.
Evangel and then Bethel, 2 squads who I do believe have been putting up some quality games, and then also closing out with Bethany, who I do believe is a quality opponent as well. But shoot me down if I'm off the mark there. I'm still again. I kind of told you when I talked to you. D2, I'm dialed. D3, yeah, I'm getting there. NAIA, it's like sometimes it's tough for me. Man. I'm getting there though. I'm getting there.
Yeah, the KCAC usually produces some very quality teams. Kansas Wesleyan usually being the main one, but Southwestern, Avila have come out of that conference in years past. But Friends, man, this is just unreal what they are doing and what they've managed to do in less than 2 years' time. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you're looking for a team to jump on the bandwagon, it is this Friends squad. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. Those boys love to hear that, dude. They love to hear that over there. I know it. But we can talk about our game of the week selection, that being Marion over Concordia, Ann Arbor, a game that had also some really big top 10 implications. Marion coming out on top of this one, 14-7, a freaking defensive battle. The conditions, I do believe it looked windy as shit over there, a lot of rain on the field. This one, just an overall gritty matchup. What'd you see, man?
Yeah, I mean, the weather was not great. These are two extremely stout defenses as well. Difference maker for me is Keegan LaBelle. I mean,
Yep.
this is a guy on the offensive side for Marion. You know, Zach Bundalo, their quarterback, wasn't quite able to get it done like he usually is. He went like 6 for 12, didn't have the best showing ever. But when you have a guy that runs for under 26 yards and a touchdown, like that's going to be the difference maker, especially against a Concordia squad that I still feel like is extremely underrated.
Yeah,
They got
which
a
is
win.
crazy.
It's crazy to think that this is an underrated squad, you know, creeping in at the top 10. But truthfully, you know, they get a big D2 win against Wayne State this year. Um, a lot of returning guys, and they kind of had a down season last year, especially the year before after having very impressive run in the playoff. This is a Concordia team that people didn't really expect to be as good as they are, which I just don't get, because this is a very solid squad. And I think it's important when looking at this game that like these two teams should still, like, Concordia's a playoff team. Marion is obviously one of the best teams in the country. I wouldn't be surprised if these guys play again, whether it's any conference implication or the playoff. Like, these teams are both extremely legit.
Yeah, and we talked about that earlier with GV and Ferris and how the AFCA poll, I believe, Witt had talked about the panelists from D2Football.com, and they dropped Ferris from like 1 to 9, and he just felt like that wasn't warranted because of the way that this Grand Valley State team was playing at home at GV and Lubber Stadium, which is really a glorified FBS stadium if you've ever been in that, man, talking about that. But, you know, sticking on this Concordia team a little bit, they've already picked up some quality wins on the season. You look at their opener against Taylor, then they go Olivet Nazarene, a really close, a tight game. You talked about the Wayne State game, Lawrence Tech. Still do have some big ones on the schedule. This next week against Siena Heights could potentially have, you know, some interesting implications as far as the conference is concerned. At Madonna should be the equivalent of a Madonna seems like the doormat of that conference right now. But then you look at the last 2 weeks, though. You're at St. Francis and you're back home against Indiana Wesleyan.
Oh, yeah.
That seems like a gauntlet right there.
That's a gauntlet. And in the mid-states, every year you talk about this absolute gauntlet. You have to go through Olivet Nazarene. You have to go through Indiana Wesleyan, who beat an FCS team this year. For people that do not know, this Indiana Wesleyan team is the absolute cream of the crop. You throw in this Marion game, like, it's just an absolute grinder. And for Concordia to look as good as they do after all this time and some of the games they've played and some they have coming up, and thankfully in the poll they only dropped 2 spots. I think that's very appropriate. They're 12th this week. They're obviously 10th in the game they played last week. I'm glad that the official poll didn't hurt them too bad, because this is a team that should be on the outside looking in on a playoff spot.
100%. Let's talk about your guys over there at D-Dub.
Yeah.
And, you know, the scoreboard says one thing. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. 27-3 win for Morningside, the number 3 team in the country at Dakota Wesleyan. And, you know, I had seen some people talking about how, you know, there's no moral victories in sport. And sure, you can say that. But for this Morningside team, you know, potentially not the worst showing, actually, defensively, at least for Dakota Wesleyan. 3 points. I mean, that's obviously ain't going to get it done. But defensively, to keep this team at 27, it's actually not a ridiculous outing for them.
Yeah, well, especially when you give the context that Morningside has not been held under 30 points in the regular season since 2016. Wow. I mean, holy cow. This is a Morningside squad that usually has, you know, a Joe Dolanchek, who multiple-time NAIA player of the year, was getting pro looks, 5th year guy from last year that graduated. Like, and this year they've kind of hit a lull. They have like 2 quarterbacks going right now. It's something very new for them. It's unfamiliar territory, and they're still very good. Morningside is a very talented squad. Obviously, they are able to grind out games against a surprising Dakota Wesleyan team who, bias aside, like, this is a team that people did not expect to win a lot of games, and they're already 5-2. Like, it's extremely impressive what they've been able to put together this year. And it makes my heart happy as a guy who played on this team the years that they struggled a little bit. It's great to see them hang in there, but for Dakota Wesleyan, the real story of this game, 0 for 6 on 4th down. That is just not going to get it done. No. Not being able to convert the red zone is going to hurt you. I mean, if you even convert half of those 4th downs, this is probably a 2-1 score game. Yeah. Like, wholeheartedly. I think all things considered, the scoreboard isn't going to show everything in this game. Like you mentioned, very stout defensive showing from Dakota Wesleyan, held Morningside scoreless in the 4th quarter. Doesn't happen for them a lot. But Morningside is still Morningside. That's it's kind of what you have to say. This is a Morningside team who has won multiple national championships for the past couple decades. They have just been steamrolling people. And all things considered, I think Dakota Wesleyan's on the right path. They're climbing the rankings and they're climbing, their schedule very well. But it's still Morningside. They will pull guys from any corner of the Midwest, from the country, and those guys can ball. So I think all things considered for my guys, it's not ideal. You don't want to lose, but not a bad showing.
Hey,
yeah,
it may as well be to these guys. I mean, talking about just kind of my initial view looking at this box score too. We talked about that performance defensively. You're able to get 2 takeaways defensively. Mm-hmm. That's huge. That keeps that offense from Morningside off the field, the Mustangs. And then you look at time of possession for me. That is 3 points on 35, borderline 36 minutes of possession. And I think it does come down to, like you said, the red zone, right? Making those decisions. When are we choosing to go for this? When are we settling, I guess, quote unquote, in certain areas? When you have a time of possession 36 to 24 minutes, basically, and, it feels like you at times probably are controlling the pace of play. You're only outgained offensively, yardage-wise, by 22 yards on the day. This, as one-sided as maybe the score looks, man, you really dig into it, and it is, like you said, I don't think it is a homer view. I think it is totally, like, from a non-biased perspective, it's kind of ridiculous to see that score.
Yeah, and I think, too, there's a lot to build off of for Dakota Wesleyan. Obviously, you didn't play your best, and you're still able to hang in there for most of the game against one of the NAIA's finest. It's extremely impressive. And I think for the rest of the way for Dakota Wesleyan, obviously, you still got to play Northwestern, who is absolutely on a roll. They're the best team in the country right now. But you also got to play a Dordt team who historically is team 3 in the GPAC, losing to Midland, who, look, I'm not a transitive property believer by any means, but Dakota Wesleyan beat Midland at home. I was there for homecoming. It's great to see. Dordt lost to Midland in another close game. So again, I have not vouched for it, but I'm just saying, like, this Dordt game seems much more in reach than it has in years past. And you win that game, you're putting yourself in the top 3 of this conference, which Dakota Wesleyan hasn't sniffed since probably 2016, 2015. So extremely impressive stuff from them.
I hear you. And I feel like this next game, Briar Cliff, is a little bit of one that actually feels a little bit more interesting than I probably would expect. You look at some of their games this year, they've lost to some really quality competition, and actually picked up a win over Hastings, and a Hastings team that has been playing at a good clip. So, records aside, they sit at 2-5 right now, as opposed to quite the literal opposite from D-Dub. That one, I don't want to say like put a trap game on it or anything, because I'm sure they won't underestimate that kind of opponent, but they still do have 2 quality matches between them and Jamestown before they get into, those final 2.
Yeah. I will say the GPAC is just a bloodbath every year. Obviously, you have your top dogs in Northwestern and Morningside, but the field in this conference usually beats up on itself. Anybody can beat anybody. My head coach, when I was there, Ross Simple, who's still there doing a great job, said that, and I fully believe that. Like, these teams could beat anyone on any given day. Obviously, Hastings squad that beat Dakota Wesleyan in overtime earlier this year, a game that you'd really wish that you had back. Briarcliff's able to get it done. And Briarcliff, like, they're usually very sneaky. They usually recruit, very well out of the transfer portal. And they do good stuff. They have athletes every year. This is not a game you could sleepwalk into. And Jamestown as well. They're building something special over there in North Dakota before they make the jump to D2. So yeah, can't sleepwalk through those.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Any to kind of finish here on the top 25, the new rankings that came out, Friends getting in there at 25, I'm sure is definitely a big one. We talked about them at length, but anything else that kind of jumps out at you as far as rankings wise?
Yeah. I think Baker and Louisiana Christian, people are not giving these teams enough credit.
Okay.
You're looking at a Louisiana Christian team who is in the Sooner Conference. Very underrated squad this year. In the media poll that I do with NAIA Ball, we have them in our top 15. They are a extremely solid football program. They've been playing good football. They're about to run up on their gauntlet. They play Ottawa, Arizona this coming week, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
Who is a 24th ranked team right now. And Baker of Kansas put an absolute ass kicking on Mid-America Nazarene last week, who was a very red hot team. 40-7 win for Baker, with only one loss to their name. I really feel like they should fit in there in the top 25, but it's kind of hard to pick apart who you'd leave out. St. Thomas of Florida, obviously at 21 at 4-3, doesn't tell the whole tale. They've played two upper level opponents and also went on the road to play Texas Wesleyan, who's another top 25 out of conference team. You gotta dig with some of these NAIA squads, because there are teams in there with 3 losses, and you're like, well, how does that make sense? A lot of these teams really want to play the best of the best, which I think bodes well for the NAIA, and I love to see it. I mean, we've seen FCS upsets multiple times this year from NAIA squads. We've seen a couple D2 upsets, and the level of competition is only getting better at this level, and I absolutely love to see it.
We saw a lot of that in D3 this year as well, and I think Whitewater and UMHB, teams like Hardin-Simmons, like going out of their way, like you said, to go out and schedule these ridiculous opponents. And a lot of times it works out. Endicott, with that late schedule of Hardin-Simmons, that ends up being a statement win for the Gulls. And now you look at the rest of their conference, which is not a great strength of schedule. We talked about it earlier, but now that's a win that, gives you that bid into the playoffs, and it gives you probably a much better seed than you would have had originally. So again, I'm with you. Big fan of these non-traditional matchups maybe, and these teams that know that they're the shit going out and scheduling other teams who are in the same boat. But we got some other top 25 stuff. Talk to me about these matchups that you wanted to highlight for this coming weekend.
Yeah. So the first one on the docket here is 6th ranked Carroll taking on College of Idaho, who's ranked number 9. For those of you that don't know about the Frontier Conference, if you're a fan of D1 football, imagine the self-cannibalism of the Pac-12 and multiply it by 35, because the Frontier Conference every year, they just beat the ever-loving crap out of each other. And these in-conference matchups are an absolute blast to watch, especially when they're both top 10. It's very hard to get a top 10 matchup because these teams just beat each other all the time. But Carroll obviously squeaking out a close win against Eastern Oregon, a very not good Eastern Oregon squad last week. Feeling a bit mortal, dare I say, right now. And College of Idaho has been one of the more impressive programs in recent years. Obviously, they're one of the newer programs in the NAIA, but they hit the ground running. They've been a perennial top 15 team for almost a decade now. They've been around for a while. They've certainly more than 5 years. So they're looking really good, and they're coming off a huge win against Montana State Northern. So I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, man. You look at some of their quality wins, at least their strength of schedule as well. At home versus Rocky Mountain wasn't even close. And then again, at Arizona Christian, another squad that I think had a decent amount of hype surrounding them heading into the year as far as their history goes, 56-17. You're like, these contests are decided like very quickly and decisively for those guys. But how about Northwestern, Dordt? We've talked about them both a little bit, I guess, but now they get a chance to square off against one another.
Yeah, and you want to talk about one of the premier rivalries in the NAIA. These guys share the same Walmart. Like they are within driving distance.
That's the deciding factor, actually.
Yeah, that's the deciding factor. They share a Walmart. These guys hate each other. It's pure Iowan Midwestern football at its finest. And this is a Dordt squad that's looking for a staple win, especially after dropping a game to a Midland squad that has disappointed a little bit this year, if I'm being completely honest. Northwestern just looks absolutely unstoppable right now. They obviously have beaten FCS Drake in overtime earlier this year. They are beating everybody by any margin you can think of. Obviously with Jalen Gramstad at the head there for Northwestern, who is probably the best dual threat quarterback in the entire country, just absolutely boat racing people. So this will be a good one. If you like rivalry games, if you like hatred in your football, this will be a good one to watch.
If you're a football person, that's the game.
Football guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But 2 more here on this little risk. Shoot me through. Give me the cliff notes on these 2, man.
Yeah. First off, we got 13th Evangel taking on Friends, 25th ranked Friends at Friends.
Hell yeah.
Obviously that home field advantage is going to be huge for them, but this Evangel squad has kind of creeped their way up the rankings this year. Not that people expected them to be bad by any means, but I don't think people expected them to crawl all the way up to 13 like they have. They haven't lost the game yet. Evangel still kind of has to run the gauntlet a little bit in the KCAC, but they're getting it done. And again, this is a red hot Friends squad that's coming off of a staple win against a top 6 team, feeling like they could beat anybody right now. And like I said, triple option football, can't go wrong with that. So
Yeah.
watch some good old boys go at it. This is another one for you.
That feels like you said, and you kind of alluded to it, two teams where the confidence is incredibly high right now. And now it's a matter of one of them is not going to be feeling that way in less than a week. And that's an interesting matchup because, like you said, two teams where the hype maybe wasn't there preseason, but now they've strung together some very respectable, at least first half of the year. But then finally, Louisiana Christian at OUAZ here, and talk to me about it.
Yeah, Louisiana Christian's another team that I feel like has crept their way into receiving votes or in the rankings. Very, very, very good squad. A lot of returning guys. They've been kind of building to this for a couple of years now. A team that's usually not in the conversation in the Sooner, but is extremely stout this year. Their defense is absolutely incredible against an Ottawa team who has also impressed a lot this year. They had a very good run last year, but they lost a lot of guys. People didn't really know what to make of this squad. Okay. Very high-powered offense usually. It's still the case. They replaced the guys they needed to replace. And this Ottawa team's absolutely rolling. So I am thrilled to watch this one. I think this one's kind of a sleeper for the playoffs because obviously after that it's Texas Wesleyan and kind of everybody else in the Sooner. So it's going to be a fun one.
Good man, dude.
Yeah,
that was fun. You rifled through that shit too. I appreciate
what can I say?
Man. That was a blast. I think you're gonna add a whole nother element to this show, and it's gonna make us better. So I can't say thank you enough, brother. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to getting you on here more and more often. All right.
Of course, man. Of course.
Sweet. Have a good night, dude. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Take it easy, man.
See ya.